Hi, it's Dr. Jeni here, and this week we are talking about foods to avoid with hypothyroidism. And so I get asked this question all the time, and it makes me crazy when someone says to me, I went to my doctor and they diagnosed me with hypothyroidism, and they told me there's nothing I should do about changing my diet. And maybe that's their endocrinologist that said that, or their primary care doctor, or whatever. And that just makes me nuts because there is definitely some things you can do. And I want to give you that information so that you have it, so that if you have this problem, you can begin to change your diet and lifestyle in a way that will make huge differences in how you feel and how your body responds to that condition. And so I see this all the time. People are told, so most of the time, 90% of the time, a slowdown of the thyroid, that the technical term for that is hypothyroidism, that is an autoimmune condition. And people are told, oh, there's nothing you can do about that. There's no cure for it. There's no way to reverse it. But I will tell you that I see with my own eyes all the time people that are able to get their thyroid antibodies down into a level that looks like they don't have an autoimmune problem anymore. So I'm not saying that it completely goes away, because you're always going to be predisposed for that if you have an autoimmune problem, but you can get it under control so that it's really not doing the things that it's doing where your body is breaking itself down. So in my opinion, that's pretty darn good. And I see those antibody levels on lab tests drop all the time, and it's from doing the things that I'm going to talk to you about today. Sometimes we need to use some nutritional supports and things like that to help, but and find out the root cause of why your body's attacking itself in the first place. But in terms of foods to avoid, no brainer, hands down, number one is gluten. And that is because if you want to nerd out with me a little bit for a minute, there is a protein in most forms of gluten. It's called gliadin. And it looks a lot like your thyroid gland. And the reason that that's a problem is that's what triggers the autoimmune process, the breakdown of your thyroid, is you're getting something leaked in through your leaky gut or intestinal permeability that from this wheat that looks like your thyroid. So your body ramps up and starts attacking that. Well, then it starts attacking your thyroid gland as well. And there's a really good link to a journal article if you read my blog on this topic. It's drjeni.com/blog. I have all the reference links and all that in there. You can read about that. The association between autoimmunity, which 90% of the time, like we said, a thyroid slowdown is the reason that it's slowed down is because it's autoimmune. There's a big link between that and a problem with this gliadin, which is in wheat. So that is why wheat is such a big deal. And let's dig into that a little bit, because people hear that and they shut me down. They go, oh my gosh, it's so hard, I can't give up wheat. But let's put this into perspective of how effective this is. So just this one intervention, giving up wheat products. There was a big study done by a thyroid, she calls herself the thyroid pharmacist. Her name is Isabella Wentz, and she actually did my training on the thyroid when I was studying functional medicine. And so I consider her to be an expert on the thyroid. And so she did a study several years back that looked at people that eliminated gluten from their diet. 88% of people that had Hashimoto's, which is the term for an autoimmune hypothyroid condition, 88% of them felt better by eliminating wheat. That's huge. It's spectacular. So I don't know where doctors get off telling people that there's nothing they can do that in their diet that'll help them. There is something you can do. You can give up gluten. And this is especially powerful when you contrast this with only 44% of the people surveyed in that study that were taking the medicine that is most commonly prescribed for this. It's a synthetic form of your T4 thyroid hormone. Only 43% of those people felt better with taking that medicine. So giving up gluten, 88% feel better. Taking the medicine, only 43% feel better. So that is crazy, right? It's just a home run for me. So let's talk about how long you need to do this, how you do it, all these good things. So the first thing that I think is really helpful to know is that it takes about 3 months completely off gluten to get max traction on this, to feel like, oh wow, I can really feel and tell the difference. So some people will come to me and see me and they'll say, well, I tried going gluten-free for a few weeks and I didn't notice the difference, so I stopped. Well, you stopped right before you were about ready to hit stride with that and see the payoff. So first of all, I think it's good to have that conversation about expectation and how long this thing can take, so you know what you're signing up for. It's going to take a few months to do this, and that's because the gut has to heal and repair, and that's not an overnight thing. So you've got that going on. And the other thing is too with that is that you don't have to go from, if you're eating gluten with every meal and then you know you need to go gluten-free, you don't have to do it overnight cold turkey. You can say, this week I'm going to cut my gluten consumption in half. Next week I'm going to do the same thing. And it could take you a month to get there, and then you're there, and it takes a little bit of time for you to see the full effects once you're gluten-free. But I think that's really helpful too, is some people do really good just giving up and going cold turkey, and some people need a little bit more help on that. So gluten is the major food that you should avoid. The other thing that I have a lot of my clients avoid if they have a thyroid issue is dairy products. And that, it's kind of for the same reason. Dairy products are known to cause inflammation in the gut and contribute to this leaky gut situation, or intestinal permeability if you want to use the big fancy doctor word for that. But whatever you call it, you're trashing up the gut in a lot of cases when you're eating dairy products. Some people react to this in a way that lets them know right away. They get bloated, they get gas, they just don't feel good. They go back and forth between constipation and diarrhea and things like that, or sinus congestion. Dairy is a big mucus producer, so if you're someone that's sensitive to that, you will see that, watery eyes, runny nose, all that stuff. So I usually will recommend, number one, let's work on the gluten, and then number two, let's do the dairy. Dairy can be a little harder though, because not everybody feels bad when they consume dairy. Wheat, if you talk to most people, they'll say, yeah, I feel bad. My stomach's bloated. I get, I just don't, my joints ache. There's something that they feel when they eat gluten that's not super good, and most of them feel better right away. Sometimes with dairy, people, they don't associate the symptoms with the consumption of dairy, and that doesn't mean there isn't a problem, because these food reactions, if it's a food sensitivity instead of a true food allergy, those things can take 72 hours to show up. And so if you're like me, I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday or 2 days ago. So how do I know that yogurt I had is yesterday for breakfast is giving me a headache or a digestive problem tomorrow night? You see what I'm saying? So there are some tests that we can use. We can look at food sensitivity testing, which will definitively tell you whether your body is producing an immune reaction to certain foods. Can be totally a game changer for some people that are thinking, I just don't know. I don't know what foods are causing a problem. So we can look at that, and then we can look at a gut test. I use something called the GI map. It's great to look at inflammation in the gut and whether leaky gut is an issue for you, and so that we can, again, we have to remove the foods that are contributing to this autoimmune problem, and then we have to heal the gut. So sometimes we need to have a little bit of intel on you specifically, if just simply removing these foods isn't doing the job. So that's my top 2 list, if you will, on foods to avoid with hypothyroidism: gluten and dairy products. So I hope you found this helpful. Yeah, thanks for tuning in.